Halo Campaign Evolved will be the last Halo game, at least for the foreseeable future. 343 Halo Studios' new studio head has been leading the studio for 4 years now. When he first started, he wanted to push out 3 Halo games in 3 years. One being Campaign Evolved, which is making it across the finish line. The other being Project Eker, which was supposed to be the next Halo multiplayer title. And the final one being a sequel campaign to Halo Infinite. As of today, Halo Studios has canceled Project Eker and does not have any mainline Halo titles in development, with the only survivor being Campaign Evolved. Which begs the question, how the hell has this studio been consistently so poorly run? Not just in the last 4 years, but its entire existence. What happened during the development of Campaign Evolved, and what is going on inside of Halo Studios? To really understand the catastrophic operations of Halo Studios, we have to talk about the fall of 343. And fall being in air quotes, really. By the way, a huge shout out to Rebs Gaming for the information you'll hear about in this video. Check his channel out in the description after this and show him some love. Back in 2023, after Halo Infinite's disastrous development, which I made a video on you can watch after this, Microsoft completely gutted 343 Industries. The entire campaign team, alongside their narrative teams who were working on story DLC for Halo Infinite, were completely decimated, including Joe Staten, one of the architects behind the entire Halo franchise, were now completely gone. The studio effectively gutted its internal engine pipeline when management decided to move away from Slipspace entirely, shifting all future development to Unreal Engine 5. Due to a lack of preparation, remaining employees were forced to take on double the responsibilities, often reaching out to laid-off colleagues to understand tasks they were not trained for. The staff working on Halo weren't the only ones affected. The studio head for 343, Bonnie Ross, also left the company, with Pierre Hintz being promoted to the new studio head. Hintz joined 343 in 2018 as the head of publishing, and at the time, he was in charge of legacy Halo products, with one of his major tasks being updates to the Master Chief Collection and content updates for Halo Infinite. It's a bit odd that he became the new studio head. Pierre Hintz and his leadership teams have never shipped an original Halo game by themselves. Pierre Hintz also referred to the layoffs as a mass culling during a company meeting, which is just completely gross. He also came from the side of Halo that was all in on outsourcing development of the game to other studios, which is a costly lesson that absolutely destroyed the development of Halo Infinite. And based on what I've heard, it seems that 343 Industries has since doubled down on that aspect, except now, instead of individual contractors working on the games, there's been a general shift towards working with contracted studios as a whole. One of Pierre Hintz's first directives was that the team will end up shipping 3 titles within 3 years, which is a very ambitious goal, especially for a studio that just lost half the people who knew anything about how to build a Halo game. So by the end of 2023, the studio was gutted, the engine was gone, and the new leadership had never shipped an original Halo game, which honestly explains the strategy of remaking Combat Evolved first, learn Unreal Engine on Bungie's blueprint, prove that you can ship, and then earn the right to make Halo Infinite's successor. It's a reasonable plan, it just depends on one thing the studio didn't have: stability, which is where the rebrand came in. October 2024, right before the final match of the Halo World Championship, Microsoft drops a pre-recorded video called A New Dawn, where they announced that 343 Industries was no more and Halo Studios had taken its place. Pierre Hintz split Halo's history into 2 distinct chapters. Chapter 1 was Bungie and Chapter 2 was 343, and now Chapter 3 was starting. But this rebrand wasn't really about Halo at all, it was about Xbox. At the same time, Microsoft was in the middle of blowing up their entire console strategy. Xbox exclusives were dying, and the new mandate from the top was that Xbox games would be going everywhere now, including PlayStation. So, Campaign Evolved was being rebuilt from the ground up with PlayStation 5 launch planned for day one. However, this isn't the exact story. Let's start with the engine. Remember how leadership announced they were moving all of Halo onto Unreal Engine 5? Well, that's not exactly what happened. According to Rebs, content creators who played Campaign Evolved early confirmed that the game actually runs on a modified Blam engine from Halo Reach combined with Unreal Engine 5. And Halo Studios even admitted this themselves, saying that Unreal's tools combined with their original Blam resources are what Halo needed to future-proof itself. So the game ushering in the next generation of Halo is running on a 15-year-old engine from Reach, wearing Unreal Engine 5 as a skin. And this engine decision had massive ripple effects across the entire studio. The engineering team now had to figure out how to glue a 2010 game engine into a modern renderer. The studio also had to prepare for their first PlayStation launch in franchise history, and considering nobody at Halo Studios had ever shipped a PlayStation game in their entire careers at Microsoft, they realistically had to hire and contract people who already knew how Sony's certification and PlayStation Network systems work. But the art team had it the worst out of everybody. Leadership severely overestimated how easy importing Halo assets into Unreal Engine would be, and it turns out 100% of the assets had to be rebuilt from scratch just to be, quote, Unreal compliant. And the craziest part is that the previous leadership already knew this would happen. Back in 2017, they evaluated Unreal Engine and chose to build Slipspace instead for this exact reason. They knew that every single Halo asset would have to be fully converted and re-architected, and decided it wasn't worth it. 8 years later, the new studio walked right into the same problem. So to claw back time and money, Halo Studios started heavily reusing Halo Infinite's designs for things like the UNSC Marines and enemy AI. This will be very important later in the video, so be sure to remember this. Now, rebuilding an entire franchise's worth of assets is a monumental task, especially for a studio that just lost a third of its workforce. So what did Halo Studios do to speed this up? They completely outsourced it. According to a source that spoke with Rebs Gaming, so much outsourcing was used to make Campaign Evolved, even for core programming and design, that it, quote, not really an in-studio project. The heavy lifting went to a studio called Abstraction, who previously did support work on the Master Chief Collection and Baldur's Gate 3. And they weren't just cleaning up assets either. They were handling level design and technical design for entire missions. At this point, Halo Studios was no longer really the developer of Halo, but more of a manager overseeing the studios who were. And Campaign Evolved was only half of what was going on. Remember, Pure Hints promised 3 games, and the second one actually in motion was Project Eker, the game that was supposed to be Halo's multiplayer future. Eker rose out of the ashes of Project Tatanka, the battle royale experiment that Certain Affinity had been building alongside Halo Infinite before it fell apart. When Tatanka died, Certain Affinity was handed a new mission to build a prototype that would answer the question whether Halo could even work on Unreal Engine 5. The team reportedly had 2 jobs. The first one would be to figure out if assets from Slipspace and Blam could be ported into Unreal Engine 5 without falling apart, and confirming that the new engine could still deliver that signature Halo feel. By September 2023, the prototype passed an internal greenlight review, but keep in mind, while this experiment was running, Halo Studios was already building Halo Campaign Evolved on the assumption that this test would pass. They were betting the entire franchise on an unfinished experiment. And what makes the situation so much worse is that Eker was shaping up to be the most interesting game in over a decade. The concept evolved, no pun intended, from an extraction shooter into what sources describe as a super big team experience, using Halo 5's Warzone mode as its foundation. You know, we're talking big maps, friendly AI, resource gathering, full customization, and the first time ever, playable elites alongside Spartans. This was the new Halo game that fans had been begging for, and oh, by the way, this one wasn't really being built by Halo Studios either. Certain Affinity is yet another pivotal external studio based out in Austin, Texas. So of the 2 Halo games in active development, one was largely built by a studio in the Netherlands, and the other was prototyped by a studio in Texas. Be sure to keep Eker in the back of your minds as well, because what happens to this project later on might be the most damning part of this entire story. But regardless, the transition to this new era of Halo was in motion, and after a year of stitching everything together, it was finally time to show the world what Chapter 3 of Halo actually looked like. October 25th, 1 year after the rebrand, and once again at the Halo World Championship, Halo Studios closes out the broadcast with an official announcement of Halo. Campaign Evolved, a full Unreal Engine 5 remake of the original 2001 campaign coming to PC, Xbox, and PlayStation 5. And to be fair, the showing was pretty solid, and they ran a lengthy gameplay demo of the Silent Cartographer, and attendees who played the demo came away mostly positive about the visual upgrades. The remake would ship with 4-player, cross-platform co-op, sprinting, overhauled sound design, and 3 brand new prequel missions focused on the Chief and Sergeant Johnson. On that stage, this studio looked like it had finally gotten its act together. But you already know how this channel works. We're going behind the scenes. If digging into the stories studios don't want told is your thing, hit the like button and subscribe down below. They directly decide whether I get to keep making these. Back to Campaign Evolved. Months before this reveal, in the summer of 2025, Campaign Evolved had run into major development problems. Halo Studios solved those problems the only way this version of the studio knows how, by pulling developers off of Project Eker and reassigning them to drag Campaign Evolved across the finish line. The experimental multiplayer game fans were desperate for quietly drained of its people to rescue a remake of a 25-year-old campaign. So while the studio was on stage hyping the future of Halo, the actual future of Halo was already on life support. The crowd just didn't know it yet. And think about what that rescue operation actually looked like on the inside. You've got the multiplayer developers who spent 2 years building an experimental big team battle game, suddenly yanked onto a campaign remake they never touched. Having to learn a Frankenstein Reach and Unreal codebase mid-crisis, you got external studios across multiple continents and time zones, all pushing towards the same goal deadline. And on top of all of that, this is the studio's first PlayStation game ever, which means that an entire Sony certification process nobody in the building had ever been through on a hard date for the franchise's biggest platform launch in history. Every single one of those things is hard on its own. However, Halo Studios was trying to do all of them at once with a workforce that had been completely gutted 2 years earlier. And during this exact window, more veterans were walking out the door, including people who had been with Halo for over a decade. We'll get into those individual stories soon, because some of them are genuinely unbelievable, but somehow all of this Frankensteining kind of worked. Fast forward to June 2026, the Xbox Game Showcase locks in a July 28th release and a $49 price tag, deliberately under the usual $70 standard. Shortly after, the game officially goes gold. But right as the game was wrapping up, in July of 2026, Rebs Gaming reported that after speaking with multiple Halo Studios employees, Project Eker had been cancelled. And this wasn't a random rumor either. Windows Central's Jess Corden backed it up, saying he verified the cancellation as 100% true. And just like that, the game that was greenlit back in September of 2023, the game that passed internal testing and was supposed to be Halo's multiplayer future, was dead. It was never announced, so it never even had to be walked back. It just quietly stopped existing. So let's take a look at Pierre Hintz's grand plan of 3 games in 3 years. The first, again, being the Campaign Evolved remake, which did make it out and, is shaping up to be a great entry. Project Eker canceled to save the remake, which means that the studio in charge of Microsoft's flagship franchise is shipping a remake and has no mainline Halo titles in active development. Now, that third point, the Halo Infinite campaign sequel, never even got started at Halo Studios because they were so busy focusing on Campaign Evolved and making sure it came out that there was no concepts or anything in the pipeline ready for a Halo Infinite sequel. A studio doesn't end up like this on accident, which brings us all the way back to the question this video started with. What is actually going on inside of Halo Studios? Well, the people who work there have some answers for us. 2 weeks before the launch of Halo Campaign Evolved, Rebs Gaming dropped his biggest report yet, built on conversations with multiple current and former Halo Studios employees, all anonymous because of NDAs and fears of retaliation. According to these sources, Pierre Hintz had been reported to Microsoft HR multiple times by multiple employees for multiple different reasons. Developers were so afraid of him blowing up at them that they would just withhold their work instead of presenting it. When the engineering team raised concerns about work-life balance, Hintz allegedly responded with a 3-word phrase that I can't repeat if I want this video monetized. One source said that they were, quote, verbally blasted by Pierre Hintz, calling the experience traumatizing. Now, to be fair, none of this is confirmed. Windows Central's Jez Corden looked into the claims independently and found that at least one HR complaint was investigated by Microsoft and not upheld. And he couldn't verify everything in the videos. But Jez also said that the comments he received lend weight to some of the allegations. Microsoft and Halo Studios have said nothing, so take all of this as allegations, but serious ones. There are a lot of people saying the exact same things, which leads to the credibility of these developers. And one of them decided to put his name on it. Glenn Israel was an art director who spent 17 years working on Halo across both Bungie and 343. Glenn Israel left the studio in October 2025, mere weeks before Campaign Evolved was revealed on stage. On his way out, he posted a message telling fellow developers that no job is worth trading away your health or your values. And he said he intends to tell his full story, quote, when it is absolutely safe to do so. Which is a pretty alarming thing coming from someone who's given 17 years of their life to this franchise. And since then, he's gone even further. He has publicly described what he called the, quote, catastrophic mismanagement of Halo Campaign Evolved, alleging he witnessed or was personally subject to blacklisting, fraud, rampant favoritism, and harassment campaigns by senior studio representatives. He also alleges he was retaliated against for raising concerns about job candidates being arbitrarily blacklisted during hiring. And a big part of his story involves the man now running Halo's art, studio art director Chris Matthews. Matthews is accused of cronyism, which means that he's hiring his personal friends over more qualified candidates, and Glenn Israel publicly backed that claim. Matthews was also repeatedly brought to HR multiple times for inappropriate comments towards coworkers, and at one point was allegedly made to apologize to his own team in a meeting. And remember earlier when I told you to keep the Halo Infinite asset reused in the back of your mind? This is why. The asset pipeline was nuked by an engine decision that previous leadership explicitly warned about back in 2017. The department was allegedly being staffed through friendships instead of qualifications. And a 17-year art veteran walked out the door, citing his health and his values. So is it really a surprise that the new dawn of Halo shipped with recycled Halo Infinite Marines and enemy AI? The art team wasn't being lazy. Based on everything we've heard, they were just trying to survive. But buried in all of this, there's one detail that deserves way more attention. Multiple sources have claimed that regular developers rallied to save Campaign Evolved. The priorities kept shifting, there was reportedly no clear roadmap, and the blame for this game's problems allegedly got pushed down onto the team. And they still drag the game across the finish line anyways. Which goes to show you the resistance and resilience of the Halo teams who are actually building the game. It's because the developers who stuck it out, not because of the leadership, that Campaign Evolved is good. So after all of this, where does Halo even go from here? The gutted studio, the Frankenstein engine, the outsourcing, the allegations, and a dead multiplayer project. What is the future of Halo? Well, it's more remakes. Halo 2 and Halo 3 remakes are in early development, and the part that gets me is, per reporting, Microsoft is planning on releasing both of these games regardless of how well Campaign Evolved does. Normally, a company would wait to see if the first remake actually sells before greenlighting 2 more. Not here. This tells you that this was never really about testing the waters. Remaking Bungie's trilogy is the strategy. Remember at the start of the video, the whole idea behind Campaign Evolved was that it would let the studio learn Unreal, rebuild their pipeline, and earn the right to make an original Halo game again. Well, Eker was supposed to be where all of that ramp up actually led to, alongside the Halo Infinite sequel. And Eker and the sequel are dead. So now, the roadmap is a remake, followed by a remake, followed by another remake. The future of Halo is just Halo's past. As for multiplayer, all that's left are rumors. There's been talk of a next multiplayer game possibly being revealed as soon as December, but after watching this studio cancel Tatanka and Eker back to back, I'll believe it when I see it. And the Halo Infinite sequel that was part of the original plan, 4 years later, it has simply never materialized. Now look, I want to be fair here. I'm not an anti-remake, and by all accounts, Campaign Evolved is genuinely a good game, with developers pouring their lives into it, and they're fighting like hell to get it into a good spot. Those developers deserve every single bit of credit for the success of Campaign Evolved, but that was never the question this video was asking. The question was how this studio has been so constantly mismanaged for its entire existence, and after everything we've covered, the answer is pretty clear. It's not the developers. They keep saving these games over and over again. It's the people above them. From Microsoft handling down directives to a leadership team that has never shipped an original Halo game, and whose grand vision is re-releasing a trilogy that Bungie finished 19 years ago. Until that changes, it doesn't matter what engine Halo runs on. So will you be trying out Campaign Evolved, and more importantly, do you even want these Halo 2 and 3 remakes, or do you just want a new Halo game? Let me know in the comments down below, as I do read most of them. And one more time, a huge shout out to Rebs Gaming for all of the reporting he has given throughout the development of Campaign Evolved. Go show him some love. His channel's linked in the description below, and don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed this deep dive. And as always, thank you for watching.